Hello and welcome. This is Reanimated, the podcast about all things zombie. My name is Stuart. I'm in California. Joining me from New York is AJ Conrad. Good morning, AJ.
Good morning.
Hello. Welcome to the podcast where we are going to talk about Interview with a Vampire, episodes 3 and 4, starring a wonderful cast of British people, Australians, and now an American. With Bailey Bass being introduced to the cast in these episodes. But before we can get there, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of news drops that happened in the past week. We are podcasting this late, and apologies to those of you who set your watches by our podcast, but that's really bad practice. Don't do it because you'll be disappointed. But because of the World Cup final, it happens right when we usually podcast. And so if any of you were lucky enough to watch the match, it was a fun game. But the fact that it went over and then over and over meant that we ran out of time to do a podcast. So sorry that this is late. However, the news, H.A. Conrad, which of these two stories do you find the most compelling? We've got Night of the Living Dead sequel and a new Zomedy.
The Night of the Living Dead sequel, I was more interested in the like they're definitely not they're definitely not terming this as a reboot. So like, or a prequel or anything like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So this is basically there's a director of a film called The Nanny, which I have not seen or heard of. Have you?
I've heard of it, and I've heard of it getting decent reviews. It's kind of like just came out.
But the director who did this is Nikyatu Jusu or Yusu. And this is the person that they are basically like giving this I don't want to call it a franchise, I guess, but sort of entrusting the legacy to this director. And she's very, I'm going to watch The Nanny because it's getting such great reviews. I admit I had not heard of it before. So
I watched the trailer. It's kind of about an African immigrant in New York who's working as a nanny, and then there are like magical or supernatural things happening to her. So it kind of hits on a few levels, I think.
It does, and visually it looks really cool. So I'm definitely gonna check that out, and I'm looking forward to see whatever they do with this. So I'm very excited to see it. It's going to be written by Latoya Morgan, and this person Latoya was a part of the Walking Dead franchise, but there's really a dearth of details about what it's actually going to be about. So yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'm kind of excited just after seeing the trailer for The Nanny and seeing what this director seems to be capable of. So we'll have more news on this later, but this is a very early sort of take on it, which is cool.
I am also interested in the fact that they're calling it a sequel. And right. The article in Gizmodo is like, hey, does Dawn of the Dead know about this? Haha. But making a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, it can just like completely preclude the other Romero movies. Like that's totally acceptable. It'll be very interesting to see which direction they choose to go. They don't have to go to a mall. They don't have to go to a mine in Florida. They can do whatever they want. And so I think that's very cool. And obviously, I was just saying last week that there wasn't any news about like upcoming high profile projects, and I think that this might fit the bill. So
definitely. So
exciting.
I'm excited to hear more about it. And in the meantime, I'm going to check out The Nanny, which was released on Prime Video, I think. I don't think it got a theatrical release, but still, that doesn't mean anything bad. It could just mean that that's what they did with this. And it seems like a lot of horror films, that's what's happening these days, especially if you're a more independent director. So I'm going to check that out. And we'll hopefully have more info on this in the future.
Yeah.
Next up,
the other one is Killing It is going to be a zombie comedy, also from Amazon Studios, so it'll probably be on Prime. And it's the two minds behind a Black Lady sketch show, Bridget Stokes and Robin Thede. And we're going to see, it's a film with four best friends attempting to redeem their college reputations by traveling to the Spell House homecoming. And their quest for vindication becomes a fight for survival when a zombie apocalypse begins to terrorize the country.
I like that this is sort of like a buddy road trip college reunion kind of show that turns into a zombie apocalypse. I like this idea.
Yeah. So and I actually have never really seen much out of the Black Lady sketch show. Have you?
No, I have not. So yeah,
So
that's it.
bona fides are kind of unknown. We should get into that, I guess, a little bit. But any zombie project is a good zombie project in my book until I watch it and decide that it's not good.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're
We'll
we're
we'll
we're
figure.
excited.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be exciting. So yeah, so I think we're definitely gonna have to keep an eye out on this and check it out when it comes out. When did they? I didn't see a release date. This was still, again, details were a little bit sparse on this.
Yeah, these are both from Deadline, and Deadline never has much as far as the information goes because I think they get they're like writing press they're getting press releases from like the agencies, so they're getting the very first
Right.
look at it. This is not including much production information,
Yeah.
but yeah, as we learn more, we will report back on in. And that's kind of it. There is not a lot of other stuff out there. I guess Norman Reedus might have got himself a role in one of the John Wick spin-off movies.
Hmm.
I don't suppose that that's going to be a conflict for him going to France and filming an entire television show. We'll see. And yeah, I think that's about it. So then back to Interview with the Vampire. I've been reading the book. I have not finished it because I read a book right before I go to sleep, and it tends to be a bit of a soporific, and I fall asleep within 5 minutes. However, I have gotten to the introduction of Claudia in the book, so that kind of works for these two episodes.
Well, it does,
Um,
and especially because of the the well, we'll talk about Claudia. We'll get into it. We'll get into
we'll get there. We'll get there. There's yes, so there are a few scenes in this episode which I found very interesting, especially contrasted with the book. But let's get to those too. This episode is called "Is My Very Nature That of the Devil?" Their episode headline or titles are always like sentence fragments, and it's I think they're just pulled right from the episode, but it's still a little like what? Okay, why is there ellipsis? Um, and it's kind of this interesting argument between Lestat and Louis here, with Lestat preaching hedonism and Louis proposing to Lestat instead of just wallowing in, the miracle that is murder and mayhem and doing whatever we
yeah.
want because we can. Maybe we should just kill the baddies.
Well, and I mean, that's always the thing about this. Like, if okay, and this is always kind of the interesting thing that I do think that Anne Rice does a nice job of examining in these books. In general, it's like if you were given these powers, you're not aging, you're somewhat indestructible, though I will say clearly Lestat is slightly more indestructible than Louis. But do you lose your humanity if like humanity is now food? And that's like the sort of struggle back and forth. um
What I
you know
found myself thinking about a lot was comparing this with, oh gosh, what was the Catholicism one, the Mike Flanagan one we just watched,
oh yeah, the Midnight Mass.
Midnight Mass. Because those vampires, when they turned, there was like a switch that was flipped where they lost all they had was hunger,
Yep.
except for only like two or three characters, right? Like
Yep.
Riley and his parents almost. All they had was hunger, and they had no compunction. They had no morality anymore. They were they were amoral or super moral or something along those lines.
Right.
And Lestat seems to have that. And later on, it seems like Claudia maybe has that, or she's too immature to have developed any kind of moral compass. But that is the thing that Louis does not seem to be able to, like, he is not switched on that way. He still has his old moral compass. And that is a lot of the crux of their conflict. But I just did find it interesting thinking about Midnight Mass and how that show approached it, where it was super normal for vampires to just be like, oh, you know what? I'm a vampire now, and so I'm gonna have to kill you. I don't feel bad about it. It's just the way it is, and that's kind of Lestat's philosophy. Anyway, it was interesting to kind of think back to that show, the last vampire thing we did, really. other than
Yeah, and I
Jamie
mean they
Foxx.
do, and that is reminiscent of some of the things that they examine, and I think that that's like an interesting thing. Is it even, there are some things with Louis, and you were saying it before, how Lestat was actually pretty I don't know, understanding and calm and whatever with Louis, because he's sort of like, come on, catch up. This is what we are now, and you're like, um uh you're just kind of behind in the game, and I don't know. And there is like, I do think that they do a really good job in this show of showing that the time is very fluid, and they especially show that as it relates to Louis and his family, the time passage, because for Louis, who's a little bit newer to this game, this is, he's very surprised when it turns out, like, say, that his sister now has like multiple children, or as they sort of like go through, like, as he's sort of, I don't want to say he's evolving, but maybe, I don't know, getting used to his new reality. It, things just become a little bit less like salient to him in the human world, even though he's still very attached in some ways.
Yeah,
So
it's a little convenient, his attachment to his family, because he
yeah,
does only remember, I think, to go to his niece's birthday party because Jonah reminds him that that's what's going on, because he went by the house, right? And he talked to his sister, but he hasn't been there in 6 months and probably would have completely forgotten. And when they're talking together, him and Jonah at the Azalea, he's like, right, she has two twins.
yep,
Like he has to remind himself that she has kids.
right,
So his attachment to his family and his rage later at Lestat, where like, you took everything from me, you took my family from me, but it's like, I mean, yeah, but also you don't think about them all that much, and when you do, it goes badly, because you haven't been thinking about them enough. Like clearly there is a disconnect. So I think you're right. I think he is evolving past that, but it's like a real painful evolution, it feels like.
right. And I mean, he's still trying to do things with like, um, he's still trying to just, I don't want to say take care of his family, and he still has some like guilt. I don't know, it, he's still like having a very human reaction to certain things, and he's very mad at Lestat for, for not feeling that way. But Lestat is older, a lot older. So
You know, in the book,
um,
Lestat was only 10 years older than Louis. Isn't that weird?
uh,
As a vampire.
oh, really? I guess
Yeah.
I thought he was a lot more old than that, just because of how they set up his. But maybe I'm, and again, I have not, so I probably should read these. I've been meaning to. I just haven't had time this week.
I mean, in,
Um,
in this, I think he is like 100 to 200 years older than Lestat, because of the
yeah.
way he was talking about flintlock rifles and stuff in the one episode where when those have been
You
phased
mean
out by the.
Lestat's older than Louis?
That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
He, yes. And I think in this version of the story, I think he is supposed to be a couple, 100 or more years older. Um, so they do this experiment about the go after the criminal. I thought that was pretty fun to watch, but then I didn't understand why Louis goes through all the process, finds his choice of candidate, and then still opts for the cat. Did you have a sense of why he did, or why they made that choice?
No, I mean, I guess, yeah, I have no idea.
Like it's
But I
still
think
not
that,
okay.
yeah, instead of yeah, the cat, I guess, is more because like at least in the books, there's a whole thing about rats and the rat thing, and I don't think that they go for cats at all. So I found that to be disturbing. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, the rats were like on ships. They made a point of saying like, if you're doing a cross
right,
oceanic voyage, you better be used to drinking rats. And actually, that was Lestat's like idea. Like that's one of Lestat's little tidbits that he likes to drop on Louis, is to be like, look, stick with me, kid. I'll tell you everything you need to know. Rats, that's where it's at. Which was kind of funny. But yeah, so Louis still opts for the animal, even though he came up with this whole idea. Lestat, like, basically, well, he kind of takes the joy out of it because he breaks the guy's neck and he's flopping in an alley. And I think that probably is what turns Louis off. That could be
yeah.
it anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know, like, but I do think that they do. They're like, I think that these actors are really great and they have a good chemistry together, and their conflict together is really well done.
Yeah, and
I
it's
like,
way more nuanced. This conflict
yep,
is way more nuanced than the book.
so much through just looks or body language, and there's I don't know, I just think it's an incredible, I am really enjoying this, just watching this play out, because I do think that some of this is what they had in mind, but it's not like you can show this in the book. So this is something that they've added in that I think is really making this a much richer story in a good way.
And they're
um
also in part of the updating of the story for this show. They have made a lot of changes. They have made massive changes in a way, and they address that directly in this episode. And I think it's so smart the way they do it. So after they go to the bar or the club, and Lestat is heckling the pianist, and then gets up and plays, and he's really good, and then they're all best friends, right? And Louis, in relating all this to Malloy, is like, and that's when he invented the Wolverine blues. And
mhm.
Malloy's like,
Well, I mean,
wait,
it's Jelly Roll Morton. It's like, come on, like come on.
wait, you're saying that Lestat invented this, and he plays it.
Yeah,
And he's like, are you kidding me? And then he plays a bunch of clips,
yep, yep,
and
yep.
these are directly quoted from the book. Like he has, he's a sow's ear with a thin carping voice. He's a stick man, and he's an idiot, and all these like really terrible things he's saying about Lestat. And they're straight out of the book, the early chapters, as far
Yep.
as I've gotten, right?
Yeah.
And then Louis is like, no, listen, memory is a fluid. I don't know what he says, but he's basically like, yeah, man, that was the less nuanced version of the story. What the one I'm telling now has way more layers or something along those lines. And this is what we're doing here. We're gonna talk this all out. But like the old version of the story of him and Lestat, he hates Lestat. He hates
He
Lestat
does.
almost from day one.
Yeah, and so there is this always this tension in the book between him and Lestat. And again, I need to read it to be a little bit more fresh. But I feel I if memory serves, a lot of what they show in um he does evolve in the books, like I think, like where he understands Lestat a little bit more, and they come to some kind of a um not like a peace, but kind of a peace. And part of that is because that Lestat then writes his own book and version of things that happens, and so I think they've combined these a little bit to show a more like a well-rounded perspective versus just Louise' perspective. Because Interview with the Vampire is very much from Louise' perspective. Vampire Lestat is clearly from Lestat's perspective. And it's an interesting way of telling a story, because you're never quite sure who is correct or not, and so this is kind of interesting. And then in this book, or sorry, in this rendition, they also have the addition, of Claudia a little bit later on, and they're pulling her diaries into this. So then
Fascinating. Yeah, that's in
so
the
that her
episode
perspective.
4.
Right,
But
right,
yeah,
right.
it's very interesting. The whole, like, that's the after we hear about the contradicting clips, and like this is the more nuanced version of the story, it goes into this kind of tale of, are they jealous when each other take lovers,
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes from that into, well, he goes and visits his family. It goes super badly because his mother has kind of been terrible to him ever since Paul died,
Mm-hmm.
and now she somehow thinks, or at least, the show kind of wants you to think she knows what he is. Really, I think she's just bitter and angry that he hasn't been coming around as much. Uh, but he loses his temper and kicks the door right off the frame, which I feel like is a huge error.
Yep.
That kind of severs any semblance of a family relationship that he has anymore. But frankly, like, his mom was just egging him on. Like, she was being horrible to him.
Yeah. And then you have to sort of think about how life must have been like for him even before all this thing, like before he became a vampire. She makes comments about the fact that he's gay. Um, and the
Yeah, and you wonder
stigma
how much
surrounding
of
that.
their, like, especially in that scene at the funeral in the next episode, Grace, is so dismissive of him and his lifestyle, and it's almost more that than him being a vampire.
Right.
It's kind of insane, but also not that surprising for like 1920.
Right. And then so there is all that sort of underlying thing. I guess, the part that I struggled a little bit with was, again, and I have to say I'm a little bit with Lestat on some of this stuff, is that, like, why does this even matter? And Lestat, the actor who plays Lestat in this character and how they have him written, it is, he does certain things for Louis, and out of now, I guess, from this different, more nuanced perspective, he's doing things, but I would say that the best way to put it is that he's playing along, but he's incredibly bored by all of this sort of humanity and, like, being even involved in some of these things, and that comes to a head. Like, I think even Lestat taking, the singer woman, Antoinette, as, like, just even that involvement is just, he's egging Louis on a bit,
Yeah,
and trying to get a reaction out of him, and you honestly just get this sense of a cat playing with his food.
but he
Um,
doesn't kill her. Like he actually
no.
just has a relationship. He has like a tryst with her, and then they break up. I mean, we don't know. Maybe he did kill her, but he says it. He's like, "Yeah, we just broke up, and that's a taxidermist I met earlier. Like, I just killed this guy instead."
Yeah.
He is just like, and I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but this version of Lestat is so much more well-rounded and
Oh yeah.
kinder to
Yeah.
Louis. Like the Lestat in the book would have just murdered whoever Louis thought was nice.
Yep.
Like that's kind of
Totally.
what Lestat was doing.
Yep.
Either he was off killing people and like ending entire family lineages, and Louis found that to be abhorrent, and he was just doing it because he wanted to, uh, or or in the case of Claudia, he turns Claudia, he kills her and turns her because Louis thinks that that's like the worst possible thing he could do, and that's obviously not what happens here in these episodes.
Right.
So it's kind of it is just such a it's like such a contrast between the
It is. I mean, and that was the other thing. Like, in the books, Lestat was incredibly, like, yes, he would do these things, but he also thought it was funny. Like, he was a true, like, he would set up these tableaus, or he would play with, like, these whole groups of people or
yeah.
families, and then, like, prop them up as if they were, like, for people to find, and he would try to basically make it as horrible as possible for Louis, and took joy out of that. So this is a little bit of a different type of view of Lestat. And that's the thing, like, with Louis, not, I wouldn't say as vengeance, but he has his tryst with Jonah, who's an old childhood lover, I guess I
An
would
old
term him.
child. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
a
he's
childhood lover. Like, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
he's,
yeah.
like, from teenage years, or he's been older than him, but they were involved with each other. And I mean, they make a big deal out of the fact that Lestat has basically stalked and, like, watched this whole thing happen. But I would say the Lestat in the book would have just killed Jonah outright, and probably put it in a place for Louis to find, right? Like,
Hmm.
this doesn't seem like this is something that would have been tolerated. But in this case, he is left to, do his own thing. So that was interesting, this shift. But I do think that the shift makes sense in the story that they're trying to tell. Um, and it's definitely complicated and complex, and like, their relationship isn't completely unhealthy, and then but it's a very smart way to build upon what happens next, in terms of the uh sort of at the end slash beginning, end of this episode and the beginning of the next episode.
You mean with like the introduction of Claudia and bringing her into it?
Yeah, and then they're also bringing in other elements. So, the other big tension throughout this are things that are happening with Louis' businesses, and what's happening with the white business owners. And there's, like, specific legislation that's taking place because it's really meant to push the Black owners out of Storyville, or out of business, basically. Um, despite all the things that Louis has done to keep these, to be a part of this community, and really feels like he's like he is like, I don't want to say he can't win, but even with all this power he has, that he's just can't believe that they are doing this. And reading the thoughts, the one part that sort of stuck with me is like he can read thoughts, but maybe he's not reading them all the time. But would you think that he already kind of knew all this stuff already? I can't imagine that they would be able to mask the racism that they're showing so boldly.
Yeah, true.
um
I mean, if he plays poker with these guys, that's a really good point. He could have been maybe a couple steps ahead, but he has none of the legitimate power that these guys unfortunately have. Fenwick and Anderson are both pretty despicable people, and it's amazing the restraint that he actually even shows by not making more of a dog's breakfast of it. I mean, what he does still sets off like almost like a Tulsa massacre.
yeah,
So that's the show is showing us that despite his power, there are societal things that he can't really influence, and
right.
that sucks.
But the part of this that, and maybe had he gone to Lestat and had they figured some things out, I mean, Lestat clearly has a lot of money. They could have done a lot of things, not like, and that was the thing, is that Louis wanted to be the face of these businesses and wanted to be actively participating. But you get the sense that Lestat could sort of buy and sell all these people, or that's at least how it feels. And he's choosing not to involve himself, but they could have done some things like in the background and slyly like bought out all these people's things and ruined them financially. There were other ways that I feel like they probably other means that they could have had at their disposal to be able to do some of this stuff, but
Yeah,
I
if
would
Lestat
be.
gave a damn, like, because
Yeah,
that's
but he
also
doesn't.
that's a big part of this too. Because when they're like, oh, Lestat could be the face of your business in the French Quarter, and Lestat's like, nah, this is Louis's hobby, not mine.
Yeah.
So he is holding it at arm's length because he never wanted to get into human business in the first place. And by the end of this, like, the human business is over. All they have is their
Yep.
townhouse. Like, they're done.
Yep.
But at the end of this episode, he goes out into the streets where they're rioting, or where the white people are burning down black neighborhoods, and goes into a burning building and saves a girl named Claudia.
Mm. Okay.
And so that's rather than a Claudia who is a 5-year-old girl sitting next to her dead mother who died of the plague. We have Claudia who is in a burning building where her aunt, I think, has burned to death.
Hmm.
Um,
And the
and
building is burning directly because of actions, because of Louis.
100% because of what Louis just did. Yeah.
And then the other part is that they've aged Claudia up, so she's probably like 10 or 11,
She
right?
was 14, I
14,
think. The
sorry.
character is 14 when she is turned, because she talks about it in the next episode.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's, I mean, this is a decision that they've made, and I understand why they've made it, and I think it works probably. But some of the issues and guilt and things that Louis has with really, and not really Lestat as much, but with in relation to the character of Claudia, it has to change a little bit. So I do think it works, but like in the books, Claudia is so young that she can't be out and on her own without an adult with her. She cannot be she can't be out in the streets. She always has to have an adult accompany her, which makes her completely dependent upon Louis and Lestat.
this is an
And
amazing set of montages, though. These like
yeah,
parenting scenes that happen
yes,
are
it's pretty good.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Not least of all because Claudia turns out to be so bloodthirsty, and just,
Which by the way is the same as in the book.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so but I think these montages are amazing. I do think that this decision to make her older works. And you still
it
have some of the same
They can
almost.
make it work. Yeah, I mean, when you like, if she's 5 in the book, Kirsten Dunst was 11 in the film,
Mhm.
which people were already like, oh, this is,
Yeah.
they're changing it. And but now that she's 14, it does change to me. I mean, they make a point of her perspective, and we're in episode 4 now, the
Yeah.
ruthless pursuit of blood wit. Blood wit? what is, I don't know. They make a point of her saying like, I'm stuck in this, tween prepubescent body, but there's a vast gulf between 5 years old and
Yep.
14 in
Yep.
terms of like the maturity of the human anatomy,
Hmm.
so it's still, they can make this work, they can write it so that it works, but it is not at all what the
No,
book
it's
presented.
definitely different, but it also presents other things that they're clearly exploring, like sexual violence. You know, like she as this younger person, she's trying to like pass as an older person, um, all the
Yeah, and
time.
Bailey Bass, the actor who's playing her, is 19 years old too.
Yeah,
Just FYI.
yeah. But I think that it still works, and and I think that this does give a little bit more freedom to the character, but it does change some of the issues. So she's able to go off and does go off eventually. But in this, she's it's a little less because like the Claudia in the books is 5, and like there's this whole deal about her having dolls. Um, and being treated like a child and all this stuff, and it's this super creepy thing because she's eventually this like you know 80-plus-year-old vampire in the body of a 5-year-old, right?
All right.
So there's definitely, and they're still exploring those things, but it's just not quite as drastic as those things are not the same.
Yeah.
um but I do think that they do a good job at um sort of creating this little vampire family. And Louis' whole comment that, this is what you do. You have a child to try to save your failing relationship, which I thought was a pretty like interesting way of looking at it. So
Yeah. It is very interesting. And like for those happy montages that are like the first third of the episode, everything is great. Like it's Lestat and Louis have less time to each other, but they seem way happier and in sync.
right,
um and there are the scenes where they are separately with her, like each parenting in their own way, which like Louis, it's like going out in a rowboat and eating fish out of the bayou while she
right,
catches fireflies, and with Lestat they go out to Lover's Lane and just murder a bunch of people.
yeah,
And Lestat has a great line in this episode too, where he's like, I think he's talking about the her first kill, and he talks about eating syrup while riding on the wind,
yep,
which I thought was pretty great. But she passes on the drunkard and goes for the policeman instead, which I think might have also been like a way for the show to be like, yeah, these are the same cops who were destroying black businesses in the last episode, and now this young black kid vampire is going to kill a white cop, um, who didn't seem like a bad guy necessarily. He was worried about this young woman,
yeah,
but then he was dead.
yeah. And then there's also the dynamic like where Claudia and Louis um can actually talk to each other in their heads, and Lestat really doesn't like that. But they have a sort of bond because they were both created by Lestat. And so there is that dynamic too, where they're their own little kind of unit. Um, and there is still the sort of the seeking of information from Lestat that he is unwilling to share. Every once in a while, he'll give away a little bit of something about other vampires, but then he quickly backtracks or shuts it down. And so you can tell that both of them have like an interest in it when it comes up. But um, that's kind of an interesting thing that I feel like they play upon, like a dysfunctional family in terms of the dynamics between Louis and Lestat and Claudia.
Yeah, that is an interesting, and that is consistent with the book too, where Lestat always has this like vault of information that he's not sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Which and except in the book, it's way more out there in the open. It's like the only reason why Louis stays with him is because he has it. He's like, well, why, Lestat keeps telling him like, you don't know everything yet. There are ways you could die you don't know about. So it's kind of yeah. There are scenes in this episode of Malloy going through the diaries and interacting with Rashid. But when he's going through the diaries, he has like, oh yeah, he interacts with Rashid, who's praying. Rashid says something to him in Uzbek, and Malloy's like, "You're not from here,"
Hmm.
and then goes back to his computer and opens up a folder called like how what is it, like household staff or something along those
Yeah.
lines. And that where he has all these questions written in his notes, where he's like, three cars for me. Do they all know they work for a vampire?
Yep.
Which I thought was it's playing into that line that I've been enjoying about this show, which is how does Louis have like a staff, like how,
Yep.
and it seems like a lot of people work for him.
Yep.
So I'm glad that they're paying attention to that. And he also has in there the why does he say things like electronic mailbox,
Yeah, it's
which was a
funny.
noticeable line that Rashid delivers to him earlier. Then the happy montages all end with a phone call to Louis that his mother has died. And even though it's like kind of insane that he would go to the wake, I guess he still feels obliged. This is where he has a very frosty exchange with Grace, with
Hmm.
whom he actually had like positive relationship at
Yeah.
first when he was a vampire, but then he did leave her baby on the floor because he wanted to eat it. So I think that
Yeah.
was kind of the problem. So she's very frosty. She's like, just give me the house. You don't need it. You've got your lover.
Hmm.
Uh and that scene ends with Claudia kind of flouncing up and being like, I'd like to go. It smells horrible or
I
something.
know.
Like,
Like she's very like teenagery, and Grace being like, I can't believe you all are raising a child together. Like she's very upset about that. So that's kind of, yeah,
it
it's,
was it was pretty great.
yeah.
And then she kind of goes. Then they have a scene with Claudia going out by herself and meeting Charlie. And the thing is, she's dressed like in clothes that she's taken off of somebody else, like a
Mhm.
more grown up adult. Can you give me your read on how she looks in this outfit with the fur and the flapper hat and everything? Does she
I
look
mean,
like a kid?
I think she still kind of looks like a kid playing dress up, but enough on the borderline where it would give you pause, right?
Because
Like,
as an actor, she is an adult.
right. I think that they did a really good job at walking that line here, and she does a great job just with her mannerisms and everything else at I guess my only, she's been, I guess it's kind of, she would have been 18 at this point in real if she had continued to age. So it's not like there's that, like, I think the cool thing is to see if later on she starts moving differently or walking differently and, you know, like, because that was something that definitely for, at least in the books with Claudia, she couldn't even like, people knew something was off about her as a kid because she wasn't moving like a kid.
Uh,
And so this is, I wonder how this sort of, but they did a really good job at like just showing the evolution of Claudia here because she's confused too. She doesn't quite know like what's happening to her. She's having these feelings, she's having these ideas. She's a lot older, but she's in this sort of body that's not and she even says like things that she says to Charlie is like, "Oh, I look a lot old. I'm a lot older than I look," like
yeah.
stuff like that. And he has a pause, but he's like, "All right." I don't know what would have happened if they had gotten further into their tryst, but I also thought that this was a really good way of showing sort of like uh I don't want to say vampire puberty, but it is kind of that, right? Where she loses control and she just can't help herself and because she's just like really into it and like so I thought that that was kind of funny, not funny, but I thought well done.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know that it's supposed to be funny, but it is. Like she accidentally murders her boyfriend. Like
Right.
that's kind of funny in
And
this story.
and then it's like, she like Lestat and Louis figure like find out and and Lestat it's like clean it up.
Yeah, Lestat
you
makes it a
know
teachable.
like,
He makes it a teachable moment. Like
yeah.
he's a dad in this. I thought that I kind of appreciated that, but unfortunately, like there's another flash to the future where Louis is talking about it, and he's talking about Claudia in the past tense. She talks about how she silenced his inner demons, but then in the future or in the past rather, gosh, she's clearly going out of her mind. She's like losing it, and it looks like she's trying to immolate herself in the sunlight as the episode ends. We're kind of left like not sure if she's going to make it to the next episode.
Right. And it's like almost, is it, what exactly is she doing? Is this like the equivalent of cutting, which is kind of what I took from it?
Mm.
Um, that she just doesn't, she's not feeling things, like she doesn't know what's happening to her. So she's trying to like force herself to feel things. And that is a very specific way. So yeah, I thought that was really well done. And her sort of I thought that the shift from like the happy montages to this was really just artfully done. And in such a small amount, I mean, they packed a lot into this episode. In terms of, the story of Claudia. I did not think that they could fit all this into, but they fit an awful lot into this particular episode. So
Yeah, the show continues to be really, really great. I think the actor Bailey Bass is a lot of fun as the only American in this core cast now of, the Louis Lestat and Claudia. She actually has I think it's a pretty authentic New Orleans sort of weird Bronxy accent. I don't know if you've ever heard people who talk this way, but
mm,
they do like drop vowels. It's a real thing. And she's pulling it off. And by comparison, Louis has like kind of a polished Southern accent, like a Southern gentleman sort of accent.
mhm.
Lestat's doing his French thing,
But
and
she
Bailey,
definitely got, yeah.
yeah, Claudia's got the like the I guess the Storyville type accent. I think that's kind of, and just she's got all that wild wonder, accidentally killing her boyfriend energy, which is has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I've been really enjoying this. I've been really enjoying I feel like this cast is very strong, but the writing and the storytelling is incredibly strong. And they are packing just a lot into, you know, into, like, I don't want to say, because these are feel like long episodes. So it feels like almost like mini movies that you're watching,
They're about an
but
hour each, right?
it feels very just really well done. And even with the changes that they've made, I right at this point I'm fine with what they've done with it. And I understand why. So, I guess we'll have to see how the rest of this plays out.
Yeah, and there's only 3 episodes left in the season. It's a 7 episode season, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So we will continue to watch these. I think they'll get us, depending, because of the holiday coming up, we might miss an episode here or there. I'm not sure, but we're going to try and stretch this out to get us to not A League of Their Own. I don't know why I'm thinking of that instead of Last of Us.
League of Their Own.
League of Their
That's
Own, the zombie.
the zombie baseball series. Mm.
Now zombies have baseball leagues too, by God. Yeah, so we might have to fit a movie in here too, but I think we're gonna keep on this train. Join us again for more Interview with the Vampire next time, on Reanimated. HA, any final thoughts?
No, I'm just enjoying this a lot. I guess I should dive into I meant to start to read the book, but I didn't. But I think I'll do that before we record
It's
next.
what I realized in Insanity is that I've never read the book before. I seriously watched the
Really?
Tom Cruise Brad Pitt movie. I was
And
like,
you thought
this
you'd
is
read the
kind of
book?
cool. I'll just go straight to the Vampire Lestat. I think that's where I started reading
Oh,
the Anne Rice books. So because none of this feels familiar to me. Like it's completely different. And I will say,
yeah.
like, it feels like a different way of writing for her too, compared with her
Yeah.
later books.
Yeah. I also think that, you and I are both old and we're forgetting all the things that
So
we
old.
read, so that's totally possible.
Yeah,
Just
it could be. Wouldn't put it past me. But so thanks for listening, everybody. Get at us on well, you can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, and you can hear all of our episodes at reanimated.podbean.com.
Indeed. And until next time, happy holidays and ciao.
Toodles.